Hello there again, and welcome to Market Insight this beautiful Tuesday morning on SOUQ News Television. Very many thanks for joining us. I am David Chiedu. On today's edition of the program, we're talking about food, of course, food systems and its transformation therein, and addressing some critical challenges that have befallen us in this part of the world, talking about Nigeria and speaking even more wider, the African continent at large. Now, Africa does indeed face numerous challenges in producing, processing, and distributing food, impacting food security, nutrition, and economic growth. Now, from some of the challenges, including climate change and conflict, to post-harvest losses and limited access to finance, these obstacles are numerous and complex, yet opportunities abound. Now, agriculture contributes about 20 to 30% of the gross domestic products of several countries on the African continent. Essentially, what this means is that if we achieve agricultural transformation as a country, talking about Nigeria, that is, 50% of our problems would be dealt with. Now, stakeholders have noted that leveraging support from concerned organizations to assist the government's effort in achieving food and income security for smallholder farmers in Nigeria is one way to go. A surefire way, if you like, and also promoting climate-smart technologies and the adoption of regenerative, market-oriented and nutrition-sensitive agriculture practices. Now, with that said, there is need to grow the agricultural sector to have a transformational impact on tackling poverty and achieving economic success. We discuss this and more on the program today. We're joined by the National Secretary, Nigeria Women in Agricultural Business Cooperative Society Limited, Mrs. Ruth Isong. She joins us in the studio this morning. Good morning, Mrs. Isong. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here this morning.
And also joining us virtually is the president of the same organization, Nigerian Women in Agricultural Business Cooperative Limited, Chief Lady Gracetiti Fredson. Lady Fredson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
We're going to start with your thoughts, first of all, Lady Fredson. Since we're talking about the sundry challenges facing the sector, the agri sector that is, on the African continent, there's a myriad of them. But, fundamentally, we would like to know exactly which ones have proven to be the most, quote unquote, painful thorn in the flesh of development of the food sector on the African continent. Can you walk us through some of these challenges, Lady Fredson?
I would like to drill down these challenges to Nigeria, where we are. In Nigeria, based on statistics done by numerous entities, both local and international development partners, our smallholder farmers generally provide over 90% of the food basket. So we're talking about the small grassroots, what people call grassroots or smallholder farmers. But at the moment, we're facing high prices of agro-commodities. In all the commodities, there's none of the commodities as of last year to this year have increased, if I use an average of 500%. So that means there's something wrong with the system, because the dollar and naira are having an issue. Naira is going down, devaluing, and food cost of food is increasing. So we want to know why all of this has happened. Okay, first thing come to mind is that in the Northeast, we have security challenges. We can't take that away. And there's nothing the smallholder farmers can do. They cannot stand against the issue of either the cattle ranchers or stand against the issue of the BK, threatening them in their little smallholder farms. And the second issue we have, it's we know for a long time our soil, as much as to have arable land, the soils we have had are reducing in the nutrients, and those farmers will want to have access to inputs. That's we're talking about fertilizers, whether organic or inorganic, or whether NPK or whatever it is, urea. They want to have access to pesticides, to herbicides to help them. But like we tell everyone, we need to treat agric as a business, not as not as an aid. Is agric is a business. So these farmers are not able to have access to these inputs because the prices of these inputs have drastically increased by approximately 500%. So they can have access to help them increase their productivity to even plant. Most of our farmers did not even plant. After I need to introduce the organization. That was the first test to input. So most of these farmers didn't plant because they don't have funds. When I mean access, I'm talking about them having the value, the money to access these inputs. They are not there. The inputs aren't there for them to access. Okay, so we talked about insecurity that is pledging both northeast and even some part of southeast. We talked about because of the devaluation of naira, and most of those things are being imported in, so their cost when converted to naira is quite high for our local farmers to have access to them. Then we talk about technology. Most of our farmers have smallholder farmers have not been that receptive to technology. And even if they want to be receptive to technology, if they can't afford those inputs, those variables, how can they be able to afford the capital investments like technology? These technologies don't come in cheap. They still come in dollars. They're not being manufactured here. Virtually almost everything is not manufactured. A lot of things are not manufactured here. So they have to come in as far as the naira is being devalued. It's going to have an impact. It's going to have a ripple effect, much more than a 5 times multiplier effect. So technology is not being technology either in equipment, technology either in methods, improved way of production or processing. It's also one of the major challenges that our farmers face. Sometimes they don't accept this because they have a narrative towards certain variety of seeds or seedling, or that come in. You hear forwarded info on GMO and the rest. I don't want to discuss it because it has so much divergent view. So they don't accept these new varieties that come in that probably has been made to be disease resistant or drought resistant, as the case might be. Then we talk about extension services. We have, based on statistics unquoted, we have over 22 million smallholder farmers, and we don't think the government had a provision to have extension services to cover all of this 22 million farmers. So we have restricted or inadequate supply of extension services to the farmer.
There, Lady Fredson. All right. We are having a little glitch there with the connection, talking with Lady Fredson. But of course, she's highlighted a number of things. I'm going to come to you now, Mrs. Isong. She's highlighted a number of things, including, access or accessibility. She's talked about insecurity. She's talked about technology and the reception of it therein by smallholder farmers. She's talked about affordability of input, as well as extension services, still going on with that train of thought. And we're going to unpack a number of these challenges one after the other. But I reckon there's another one which she probably would have mentioned, but for the glitch in that connection, which is, she did mention it, a little bit of it, drought. There's also that factor in some parts of the country, and that has, it's been evident in the availability of food, the accessibility of produce, and even the affordability of it all therein across the length and breadth of the country, which, has been amidst the recent hike in prices we've seen across the board. Now, as a stakeholder, what would you say that the government can do differently that they haven't already done, in order to sort all of this out, as it were, because it's indeed a really critical issue, and it's biting Nigerians, as it were?
Well, thank you very much for that amazing question. First and foremost, we want to appreciate the government of Nigeria, the federal government. They've been doing a whole lot. We know that there are several people put in place to ensure that agriculture meets the best practice in the country. Because if we look at the Arise agenda of some of the state governors and then the renewed hope agenda of the president, we see that agriculture has been given a major focus in this day and time. But what is the problem now? We see that there's a whole lot of lack of infrastructures. Now, from the north, just like my president earlier mentioned, we have poor infrastructures, bad roads. Sometimes before this food produced by smallholder farmers will get to the destination as the market, there's a whole lot of time lost because the roads are so bad, vehicles will break down, and this will cause post-harvest losses on the part of the farmers. And now again too, you remember in 2003, there was this declaration in Maputo. Maputo, we happen to know, is the capital of Mozambique. And then we know that their seaport is like one of the finest in East of Africa. That declaration in Mozambique was that after the African Union presidents gathered in that conference, they were implored to ensure that they allocate 10% of budget to agriculture. But we have seen that there's been a decline in the budgetary allocation of agriculture. In Nigeria, we see that the government is staggering the percentage between 1.3 to 3.5. This 2024, we see that it's 3.51% that is allocated to agriculture. Security has the highest budget and every other sector. Now, if you have 3.51 allocated to agriculture, how does these infrastructures get, you understand? How do this input get to the smallholder farmers in different communities? We see that now there's high cost of inflation, there's high cost of inputs in form of farm inputs, farm implements. Mechanized farming is not even a luxury this time around. And that is why, as a group, NiWAB, we feel that it is time for us to see how we can cluster our women in various communities in the 6 geopolitical zones. Because just like my president wanted to mention earlier before the glitch came up, she wanted to educate us on why our women are like the drivers, you understand, the linkage between, because there's a huge gap between the smallholder farmers and the market. Now, what we have done as a group is to see how we can cluster women in various cooperatives in different communities across the 6 geopolitical zones. What have we done differently? We are sick of being given handouts on a daily basis. The government, people have been relying so much on government giving them stipends. I saw a video recently, I don't want to mention the state, where a woman, I think is one of the government officials, was handing over 1,000. Now, while that will be applauded, we don't want Nigerians, because if you give the person 1,000, what can 1,000 naira do today? We are thinking of teaching people how to fish rather than giving them handouts. So we are sick of all of that. So the NiWAB model is completely different. What do? We see ourselves as business women, not just farmers. And we see that we are doing farming differently. Because I've sent, a lot of persons have seen our videos. Sometimes when we attend conferences, they look at us, they say, oh, you, a farmer? But we are changing the narrative because farmers can be slayers as well. We can be slay queens and then we farm. But we are telling everybody, welcome on board. Let us do things differently. So we have clustered these women in various cooperatives according to the priority crops of each community. In Akwa Ibom State, we are known for palm oil. We are known for cassava. We are known for every other crop. In the north, we are known for several crops. In South, they are known for several crops. You understand? So we cluster these women in various communities according to the priority crops of that community. So now what do? Our goal is to set up mini processing centers, like a farm cottage, where instead of you worrying about bringing tomato from the north to down south, and then worrying about the problem of infrastructure, we have provided those farm cottages where there and then they'll be processed as well as being marketed for export and both local consumption. So what have we done? We have created jobs for our women in those communities because they are the ones who are going to be employed in those farm cottages to take care of the farm, from farm to production, to packaging, to processing. So more or less like from farm to the table or farm to fork, like the white man will use that principle.
Now, in all of these, I mean, it sounds very interesting what the menagerie of your organization has done or is doing. I mean, it's quite laudable, I would say, for all intents and purposes for the sector. However, I'm curious as to whether or not you get enough support from, whether it's the subnational level of government or even, top to the, as far as up to the center, as you were. Can you, give us, just give us something in that regard?
Yes, thank you so much for that lovely question. Now, that's why I said the federal government has done a whole lot. Now, but the thing is, most people don't have access to these things. How do you break that gap? That's why we are there. How do you break that gap? Because early this year, the federal government, by the way, we are regulated by the Federal Department of Cooperative because we are a national apex. You understand? We just got 3 months, we are 3 months old, even though in the past 15 years, we've been operating in various states in small groups like primary societies and all of that. But the national apex was registered officially 3 months ago, June 29th to be precise. Now, what has the government done? Through the Federal Department of Cooperative, there have been inputs provided to us. So we have some of this input distributed to our women in various, the 6 geopolitical zones for them to farm. We follow and monitor the processes, you understand? So that when production comes out, we can be able to upscale their lives by purchasing those products from them and then giving to off-takers. We have not relented on that. We have gone ahead to even speak to international development partners and other government agencies. We write to them seeking support. Support in the sense that we are not saying come and give us money. Some of the banks like BOA and BOI are there. For some of them, they have 1-digit loans. What are we doing? Because we want to change the mindset of some of our farmers. We want to see how we can be able to access loan as a group, give to these women, let them farm in clusters, and then we provide off-takers so that whatever they farm, they have markets ready for this purchase of some of these commodities.
Would you say that the reception therein in these advocacy efforts or initiatives, as you were, has been productive or has been encouraging, on the part of the women? Would you say that?
Well, initially it was a struggle. We are used to the free mentality. You understand? Even now, we just rounded up a program with the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Community Engagement, SOUQ. It was a difficult thing to be able to convince the women that for once, you are coming as a businesswoman. Bring your produce to the center. You have people who will purchase your produce. It was difficult to be able to convince them because they are used to when such gatherings take place, they give them stipends. They give them 5,000, 10,000. But now, gradually, their mentality is changing. If I tell you some of our states like the likes of Bayelsa, the likes of Akwa Ibom, the likes of Cross River, the likes of the North, the 19 states in the North, and then the 17 states in the South, they are doing greatly because our women are beginning to be receptive. Who doesn't want to change their lifestyle? We see that the various allocations of funds have been given to other sectors. Now, there's something my president and I came across recently. We saw that even the oil sector, the banks like Nexim and BOI were giving out loans for a 5-digit, 1-digit loan, like 5%, as low as 5%. Now, but for farmers, they are saying 9%. So what we are trying to do and negotiate with some of these banks is to see how some of these interest rates can be reduced so that women can have access to these loans, so they can be able to produce for the global market, not just Nigeria, because our plan is to produce to feed Nigeria first and then look at exports so they can earn foreign exchange.
Interesting stuff. Now let's move this one further and talk about some attendant matters that of course have exacerbated the issues which we already know that exist. Now, earlier you talked about, movement from point A to point B, and all of that. That's part of the problem. But then again, there's also the issue of storage, which a lot of experts have talked about, across different fora, that it is indeed a really, really big problem. As a matter of fact, they say, or they posit that a lot of the deficiencies in storage facilities have led to a myriad of problems with regards to post-harvest losses and whatnot. It is indeed, as I said, a critical issue. How do we get around this?
Okay, thank you so much. You see, post-harvest losses on the part of farmers is grave because you see that there's a time it takes for you to be able to, for the production process to be complete. and that time is a waiting period. And then when you harvest, because of poor infrastructure, these things cannot get to the market in good time, and they perish. About 65% of post-harvest losses. So how do we reduce that? How do we mitigate some of those things? That is why we've come up with that model to set up farm cottages within that environment, within that community. Now, take for instance, if we have off-takers that say, okay, they want to buy gari, what do? We set up mini agro-processing centers within that community that produces gari. We ensure that there's quality, the standards are being observed, because there are different agencies that are in charge of all of that, like the NAFDAC, like the SON. They are there to facilitate some of those standard processing. So we make sure that our processing centers are near to the farm cottages, so that once these women harvest this, they can process. That way we can be able to reduce some of the post-harvest losses. Now, take for instance tomato. We noticed that a few months back, tomato was scarce in the market. It got to a point where tomato was sold for 22,000 per basket. What happened? Some of these things are as a result of diseases that invaded the farms. What do we do to be able to mitigate some of these things? We have to do private climate smart agriculture. What do we do? Improved in seedlings, application of fertilizers, you understand, and timely application of some of these fertilizers, you need be. Then we have to be able to educate these women and farmers on how to be able to use these various models to upscale their businesses. Now, it is something that is very different, because when you look at farmers, there are people who are very content with what they've been doing and the practices all along. So it's very difficult for you to sometimes change their perception, but we are trying to educate them. That is why one of our objectives is to educate and change the mentality of the people. Because just like my president mentioned earlier, a lot of them are not receptive to these new seedlings and improved seedlings that is being introduced into the market. They feel it is something that is scary. So they need to know that these are ways, there are various ways that they can improve their farming business. Introduce mechanization to them. We have women in our group who can operate tractors. We have women in our group who can operate some of these mini processing machines on their own. So we don't need, and we know that women make up 70% of the farm workforce in Nigeria. So in a way, our group is trying to see how we can mitigate some of these issues and reduce the post-harvest losses, so that at least our farmers will not have to experience so much pain in the process of providing food security for Nigeria.
Right. We're going to stay on this thought of technology and newer ways or newer innovations with which to move the sector forward. We're still talking about food systems transformation and addressing the challenges bedeviling the agri sector in the country and, of course, the wider reach of the African continent. But of course, we're still staying with Nigeria, as it were, one of the biggest economies on the continent. Now, we are still talking with the National Secretary, Nigerian Women in Agricultural Business Cooperative Limited, NiWAB, Mrs. Ruth Isong. She is the National Secretary. Thank you for joining us in the studio. We're still having some technical issues. We were joined earlier by the president herself of said organization, NiWAB, Chief Lady Fredson. Hopefully we can sort that out and then she can be part of the rest of the conversation. But of course, we're still taking it further. Earlier, she spoke about, technology, its entrance into the sector, and the seeming quote and unquote pushback, if you like, by some of the smallholder farmers whose lives were, or rather have more or less been woven around the subsistence farming in hinterlands, as you were, which is understandable. Sometimes change can be a little bit, disruptive, per se. We'll get to that part. But first of all, let's talk about, what's the thing, or what's the it thing at the moment. So in your view as a stakeholder, what sort of technological advancements or technological initiatives would you say has the most promise for the sector that could bring about the much needed transformation or the much needed development in the sector across the board, especially in those places we talk about that are, slightly receptive to or slightly less receptive to these initiatives?
Thank you so much. We see that, like my president mentioned earlier, insecurity has been a major problem in Nigeria. Now, among the 6 geopolitical zones, we have narrowed it down to some of the very secure states. To see one, how did we do that? We see where we can get good access to land, you understand me, and then where there's massive security. Because Now, because of the security, some of our farmers, some of not, have been displayed, and then the middle belt as well. Some of them have been displayed from their various farms. So what do we do? Like I told you earlier, our motto is to set up mini agri-processing centers, like farm cottages, because everything will be like a one-stop shop. Now, we have spoken to some of our partners who are into the mechanized sort of farming, who will come up to set up some of these processing centers. Some of them will be outsourced locally, will be fabricated locally, because we have a whole lot of our women who are doing some of those fabrications. We have some of our youth that are into all of these, they call them rain guns and all of that, like irrigation processes and all of that, to be able to reduce some of this effect on climate change. So some of these things have been set up by we have that model in place. So what we are looking at now are the government agencies, international development partners to partner with us to see how we can set up some of these mini agro-processing centers to reduce post-harvest losses. If you see what farmers go through, you will feel for them. And that is what we are trying to reduce, so that time between the linkage between the farm, smallholder farmers and the market will be reduced greatly. And then the losses can be mitigated to land. So when these farm cottages are being set up, nothing is stopping us from setting up a processing plant in like Macaulay, because we see that Benue State is rich in oranges, yams, and all of that. We could set up something like that where juices can be extracted directly. Sometimes it can be dried using some of the, I think it's the SDG 7 that talks about clean energy. You understand? We employ technologies such as solar energy for some of these drying processes, where we don't have to use some things that will create something that will create some dysfunctions in the system. So we're trying to make sure as much as possible we follow the SDG goals, like the SDG 5, zero hunger for all, the SDG 2, zero hunger, SDG 5, gender equality, and all of that, a good work environment for some of these farmers. So those farm cottages will a great deal mitigate some of these post-harvest losses for our smallholder farmers.
Now, let's go back to that part where, she talked about the receptiveness of this, innovations, as it were. How were you able to circumvent that little hurdle? Because I've been in situations in some advocacy, endeavors where you find that people, because they hold a certain, cultural belief or traditional belief, sometimes it's even creed, you find them being a little, less receptive, there's a lot of pushback, and, it makes the work a lot difficult. Because in the end, what you're trying to do is bring some sort of developmental, action, if you like, to them, or developmental feat to them. But because of that little stumbling block, you find that it takes either longer, or in some cases, it falls through entirely. So can you walk us through that little hurdle?
Well, with no disrespect to any of these communities, there are some communities that we got into that the women are not allowed to own lands. That was a major problem. So what did we do? As soon as we found that out, we were told by those women that they only work in their husband's farms. And, well, we said, fine and good. We're not going to try to separate any tradition or try to change anything. This is your comfort zone. What do? We got into those communities, we acquired lands for our pilot projects, and then what did we do? The women are more or less the workforce, complementing the efforts of their husbands in some of those locations, you understand? So it is a difficult thing to try to, because when we entered that community initially, we greeted these women, they refused to speak to us. Until someone who understood their language could break it down to them that these people came with something good to you. And then before we knew it, they were very receptive, because we have so many other things. We were teaching them how to farm tomatoes and do some of this. They were doing piggery and some of this animal husbandry and the rest. But their practices were still very archaic. So we brought in people to teach them how to do some of those things. And then they were very receptive with time. You understand? You see the excitement in their faces. Okay, again, too, in Akwa Ibom, when we had one of these events last month, it was very difficult for some of the women to come out from their communities to the town where we wanted to host this event. But then again, with persuasion, you understand? And that is the beauty of NiWAB, because we have our presence in the 36 states plus FCT in Nigeria. We have our local government coordinators, we have our state coordinators, we have our ward coordinators who reach to the grassroots farmers. So there's already a structure in ground. And now what do we expect from international development partners? We've done the groundwork. Your job is to see how you can partner with us, to see how we can execute some of these our models in order to be able to upscale our farmers.
All right, interesting stuff. Now, she also mentioned affordability of inputs, as you were. And I know that a lot of these things are, they cost a lot of money. They're not, cheap. So as a stakeholder, what measures have been taken with regards to collaboration or partnerships, particularly with the private sector, vis-a-vis financing and, sundry support in that regard, as well as, the likes of civil society organizations. Let's not talk about the government right now. I mean, you hinted about that earlier, some of the support and all of that, but let's leave the government out of it right now. Let's talk about the private sector. Let's talk about CSOs and other, humanitarian, if you like, organizations who are enthusiasts, or whom we can refer to as enthusiasts as far as the sector is concerned. What sort of collaboration have been struck, or how can we enhance the already existing collaborations with these different individuals that I mentioned?
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much again. We see that there are several organizations present here in the country. Some of the models they have introduced have worked in other African countries. Why not Nigeria? We see that the FAO has worked and partnered with Kenya for some years, because Kenya is one of those countries where drought was their major problem. But FAO, in conjunction with the United Nations, the women arm, partnered and clustered women in small, small groups. And what did they do? They taught them how to plant trees to see how they can reduce some of these climate change effects on their soil. They planted trees, they planted cotton, they planted flowers. Do you know that these people built an income from that practice, to the point that they now started introducing animal and livestock? They produce milk, they produce so many other things now for export, not just local consumption, equally export. So USAID has something like Feed the Future that they've initiated. And that's a platform for us to be able to leverage on. We have the FAO, we have the United Nations Women, we have BOI, we have BOA, we have Nexim Bank and all the likes. What we have done with them is to see how we can have discussions with them where they can reduce the interest rates, because these people are farmers. Now, there's a waiting period. My president was an advocate of the moratorium given to us by this bank, because sometimes this loan are issued to some of the smallholder farmers, but the moratorium period is very short. Period of return. Now, let's not forget the fact that when you plant, there's a period of waiting. So what happens? If you say they are supposed to pay back next month, the crop has not been harvested yet. So let us give them a moratorium at minimum 6 months, so that they'll be able to harvest their crops, sell, and then they can begin to pay back those loans. And experience shows that women over time have been, like, let me say 80 or 90% people who have been paying back their debts. So with confidence, we approach some of these NDAs. With confidence, we approach some of these banks. With confidence, we approach some of these international organizations for assistance to see how they can help us upscale our women. Because for sure, as far as those loans are being issued out to those women, payments will not be a problem. And that is why we have our representatives in all of the states to be able to monitor some of these combats.
Interesting. Now, let's talk about extension services. She did mention that there's a deficiency of that, as it were, across the board. Can you walk us through how that has been of immense impact, if at all, on the sector?
Yes, kudos to the Minister of State for Agriculture, because we had like a roundtable session some days ago, and those were issues that were brought up in terms of how they can introduce more extension service workers to some of these localities. Because now, just like we said, training and educating these women has been a problem over the years. But now, with the help of these extension services and all these extension workers who can get this training to their doorstep, they don't need to come out to town. They don't need to come too far. You can use their pilot projects, because that's why we have all our pilot projects or farms in some of these states in Nigeria. Now, if we have those extension services there, we have our local farmers coming, they invite them for trainings, they turn up, they are very receptive to change, even though it was a difficult thing, but they have seen that we come with something good. We are not saying, give us money to take this. And that's why, as NiWAB, quote me anywhere, we have not been able to ask our women for a dime. We are rather looking on how we're upscaling their businesses and their farm business. We have given them various promises and hopes. Now, look at a farmer retiring and earning benefits, you understand, in terms of pension. Those are the models we have put in place. It is a thing of joy because they've never experienced that. How about access to medical care? How about some of these things that they have not been able to be granted access in the times past? So the narrative is actually changing, and it is high time our development partners key in to what NiWAB has to offer.
Speaking about training, I want to move that further to another demographic, and based on their own psychographics, how they behave and what they're receptive to. We're going to talk about, how to bring them in. Because of course you've mentioned the women, and it's been mostly about the women and upskilling them, as you said earlier, using your exact words, being a farmer and still being a slave queen.
Yeah, thank you.
Which is quite, interesting to see, by the way. Yeah, exactly, that's the word, very unique, very unique indeed. Now, it's delightful stuff. But this other demographic I'm talking about, the young people, you find that a lot of them today, when you speak with them or speak to them about agriculture and its concerns, they squint at you because, they're wondering why you're talking to them about agriculture. In their heads, they consider it as not something for them. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it's just not for me. That's how they think about it. What they think as being for them are things like, or rather are sectors like the tech sector, the entertainment sector, perhaps in some regard, the broadcast or media sector, and that's very broad. We could talk about digital media and all of that. Those are the things they think about, and fashion too. But agriculture, for some reason, is the least on their plate, as it were. So what sort of trainings, what sort of initiatives, what sort of advocacy has NiWAB put in place, if at all, to make sure that this other demographic are brought to the fray? Because the more the merrier.
Yeah.
This is not a case of three's a crowd. The more the merrier. If we have more people across the board, we'll be better off. So what sort of initiatives are there to bring these people?
Thank you for that wonderful question. Now, before I answer that question, I want to point out that cotton is a product of agriculture. If you don't plant cotton, you don't have your fabrics for your clothes. So if you want to be a slave farmer, you plant cotton. It has worked in Kenya. It is equally going to work in Nigeria, because I hear in the north, there's a large cotton farm and people are doing all of that, because there's a deficiency in that particular sector. Now, to answer your question, we have a beautiful national youth leader. Her name is Farida. She's a young, smart, and vibrant girl. When we met her, it was imperative that we have that youth arm, because she spoke with so much vibrancy. And then the questions she asked us were I was taken aback, like, okay, I have never thought of that. She asked us, what is your generation going to hand down to people like us? So you need an arm, because I told her, okay, sell yourself. And then she asked me pertinent questions that I could not even answer. And then I deemed it fit. I spoke to my president. I said, no, this lady, we have to retain her. We spoke to her mom because she's still in school writing her exams, but she has a wealth of knowledge. So we created that arm for the youth. Now, what are they doing? They're learning from the so-called women who are older than them, so that whatever practices that we have done and carried out over the years, they duplicate it. And then as we age and take the back seat, as time progresses, they are in the forefront, championing this cause. So those are things that we have done and put in place. We have another arm of NiWAB too that talks about persons with disability. You understand? We've created that arm because we have some of our persons who are disabled, not in a bad word, but they are physically challenged. But then again, they have farms and they want to work. Some of them, you see the zeal within them. So we include all of these people into our fold. And then we have created an arm for them to be able to carry out their own things. Like we have a demo farm in Kano. When we got some of the inputs from the FDC, we gave to some of these our youth leaders. These people follow to the latter. As poor, as remote as some of those communities are, they carried out videos. When the inputs were handed over to them, when they were given to the particular women who are going to farm this on those lands, they made videos of this. These women cannot speak English. You could see the bare land from when the inputs were handed over to them. Progressively, they kept recording and sending to us. So they are marrying technology with agriculture, which is good for us. Some of our social media handlers are very young girls, and they're very dynamic and smart. As this program is going on, I bet you there are people across Nigeria who are watching because of them and their engagements. So that is something that we have put in our plate and in our motto to see how we can carry things that we can hand down to the younger generation in order for them to be able to continue that.
Now, besides NiWAB's efforts, speaking more generally, governments across subnational and national level, do you think that they have done enough as yet? Now, this is not to cast aspersions, as it were, just, getting experts' opinion, as it were. Do you think as yet we've had enough of that sort of, outreach, or that sort of, enough advocacy in that regard to bring in more young people into the agriculture sector? Because when we think about agriculture, you look at the major food baskets of the country, we're talking about people who are middle-aged and above, engaging in these farming activities. The amount of young people, perhaps under the age of 23, are few and far between. So in your view, would you say that so far the assessment has been encouraging?
I would say that. Because we see that even the federal government has created an arm for youth development. You understand? So, and the person who is anchoring that sector is a very young and vibrant lady. I've watched her speak in one of these African Development Bank events, and then she came with so much of her, because the Africa AFDB has done so much. We have a lot of their incubatees who are doing so well, some of them in tech, some of them owning farms, some of them introducing different technologies to agriculture that is making it climate smart and climate smart agricultural practices. So these are things that are very catchy for the young generation, because we know they are very dynamic and very vibrant. So we need things that will interest them. You understand? So all of these packages are there. So I must applaud the federal government, because they have done a lot in terms of incorporating the young ones into the industry.
Interesting stuff. Truly, truly. We have been talking about food systems transformation, and of course, dissecting the myriad of challenges that there are, and talking about how they impact the sector one after the other. A lot has been said. As a matter of fact, we started the conversation with a hearing from the president of the Nigerian Women in Agriculture Business Cooperative Limited, that is, NiWAB, Chief Gracetiti Fredson, beg your pardon, and she, did justice to the question earlier, outlining a lot of the challenges which, we have then unpacked with our guest with us here in the studio, Mrs. Ruth Isong, the National Secretary, Nigerian Women in Agricultural Business Cooperative, talking about access, first of all, which is also key, issues like insecurity, issues like new innovation, talking about technology and whether or not it's being properly received, affordability of input, extension services and a lack of it therein, infrastructure, existential issues or existential crises like flooding and drought and the rest of them. These issues abound, but of course, finding a way around them to be able to better the lot of Nigerians through that particular sector that contributes enormously to the country's GDP is very, very essential. Of course, roping in inclusion, talking about women in that particular sector, and NiWAB has, in collaboration with stakeholders, equally have done tremendous work in that regard. And of course, this is, albeit to the betterment of the sector and by extension, the lot of our country, Nigeria. Many thanks again, Mrs. Isong, for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you so much.
Market Insight. Now let's take you straight to the currency market, give you an update of what the market looks like today, the 24th of 24th of September 2024. Now, the official market, the dollar is trading to the naira at 1,676 naira, to the pound sterling at 2,269 naira, to the euro at 1,896 naira. At the parallel markets, you find the dollar there trading to the naira at 1,616 naira, 2,161 naira, and 1,800 naira. That's what it looks like right now on the parallel market. And that's the report, the FX report right here on Markets Insight. That's the much we can take, and that's the much we're bringing you today on the program. Do join us tomorrow for another titillating edition of Market Insight. But until then, do stay tuned to your mobile set or your television set, as you were. Join us at 12, which is just in a few minutes, for the news updates. Many thanks for watching again. I am David Chiedu. Enjoy the rest of your day.